Today Mr. Dockrell is going to be showing you how to create a drawing of an eye. So he starts off with a few common mistakes. The first one is that when you draw an eye, you show the whole of the iris. So you create a circle that you can see the top and the bottom of. When looking at a person straight on, the top part of their eyelid and their brow will cover that top part of the iris. So you'll see there that he's just bringing it up to meet that top line, so it cuts it off a little bit. The second common mistake is that people draw eyelashes all across that top lash line. Whereas if you're looking at a person straight on, quite often you can only see them from halfway along. That's because the rest are pointing directly out. They actually thicken up along that outer edge, so he's going to demonstrate how to do that later. Eyes can often be more enjoyable to draw when they are expressing an emotion. So Mr. Dockrell's example here, he's taken a photo of himself with his brow furrowed so that he's looking angry, but any expression will do. You can take a photo of yourself or you can find one on Google. Now, when you're using your image, you want to make sure you can see as many details of that eye as possible, so you're going to want to blow it up as large as you can. So we want you to start with some nice light marks. Mr. Dockrell's using a HB pencil. If you've got one, that's great, but if not, any pencil will do. And he's just sketching out the main features of the eye. So you'll see he's got the pupil, the iris, he's outlined the whole eye, and make sure you're including that waterline at the bottom as well. So it's really important that you're using your nodding dogs technique, looking down at your paper and back up at the eye continually and drawing those ghost lines nice and lightly. Next, you're going to begin to exaggerate those outer lines. So it's darkest along that top brow, and then along the edges of the bottom lash line as well. And you want to remember that the eye is spherical, it's a ball shape, so along those outer edges, you're going to start to blend that tone in. It should be darkest on the outside, getting lighter as it comes into the centre. Moving on now to the pupil and the iris. There's always going to be an area of bright highlight here where the light is reflecting on your eye. So have a little look for where that is within your own picture, and then just really lightly map out that shape, just like Mr. Dockrell's doing here. Next, using a darker pencil if you've got one, you're going to apply some pressure around the edge of that iris. Most people have a darker line there. Mr. Dockrell has used a 6B pencil. From there, your top lash line is going to form a shadow that covers your iris and pupil. So just lightly join up the shading from the edge of the eyeballs all the way along the top. So next you're going to start shading your iris, and you're going to do this with small lines working around the edge. You want them coming out from the pupil as if around the edge of a clock, okay? And you're going to be careful to avoid those areas of highlight that you've already drawn the shapes in for. So continuing with that hard pressure or a 6B pencil if you've got one, you're going to start shading the pupil. So this should be the darkest part of your eye. If you find that you need to go back into any of the highlighted areas to make them lighter, you can do this now with a rubber. You're now going to start to develop the shape and tones of the cornea, so that's the inside part of your eye. Again, make sure you're using your nodding dogs technique, looking back and forth at the picture and at your drawing. So draw out those shapes that you can see and then start developing that tone. You're going to want to continue with that dark pencil, lots of pressure just to go around the edge of the eye, making sure you've got that clear ball shape. And finally, you are just shading into that waterline. You're now going to want to start developing the tones around the eye. So you can see that Mr. Dockrell is shading into all of those furrows where he's squinting, and you can see those wrinkles around his eyes. So that's going to be the darkest areas, and then you are going to use gradual pressure, so getting lighter and lighter to build out into those shapes. So in Mr. Dockrell's image, his bottom lash line is clear. So to draw those eyelashes in, you're going to want to flick your pencil just in slight curves, and you can see that it's roughly following the shape of the eye as it goes around, so it should be following in a clockwise motion. And remember, to get the ends of those eyelashes nice and pointed, you need to flick that pencil off the paper. That process can then be repeated for the eyebrows. You're going to want to draw each hair individually, as you can see Mr. Dockrell doing here. And you're going to want to follow that same process for the eyebrows. So you can see Mr. Dockrell here is creating curved lines which then flick up to create a nice point, and he's layering those lines up to create the texture of the hair and showing where bits are darker. And that's the final eye complete. Can't wait to see yours.